This bill will make sure our students spend their time in the classroom learning reading, writing, and arithmetic.
They are required to provide schools that are equal, safe, attractive.
It's really not diverting from one place or another. It's really about empowering parents and making sure that if they do want to choose other options, those options are obtainable.
What the ACLU did is it filed a brief supporting the students and arguing essentially that the First Amendment has long protected the rights of students.
We know there's some real special circumstances for some of our students that may struggle to meet the needs of these requirements. Well, we're not going to let that hold a student back from graduating from high school.
This is a Your Voice, Your Future town hall. Crisis in the classroom.
I think we would agree that education remains the foundation upon which we build our children's futures. It shapes the leaders, innovators, and stewards of tomorrow. But when that foundation crumbles, the consequences are so profound. Without the opportunities that a solid education provides, we risk leaving our children vulnerable to a path of criminality, destitution, and in the worst cases, an early death. The stakes couldn't be higher, and that's why we're here to confront these crises head on in this edition of Crisis in the Classroom. I'm your moderator, Armstrong Williams. And we began tonight with the American Civil Liberties Union throwing its support behind a lawsuit against the LEARNS Act. Back in March, a group of students and teachers at Little Rock Central High School sued the state, challenging a section of the LEARNS Act that prohibits, quote, indoctrination in schools. Sound familiar? Well, KATV Channel 7's Emma Allen shares that story.
The ACLU of Arkansas filed a friend of court brief in Walls v. Sanders, a case that strikes at the heart of the Arkansas LEARNS Act. The challenge came about in March. A group of teachers and students at Little Rock Central High School challenged a section of the LEARNS Act that prohibits indoctrination of Arkansas students. In May, a federal judge in Little Rock granted a preliminary injunction saying the state cannot prevent teachers from discussing critical race theory. But the judge did not block the state from enforcing its ban on the, quote, indoctrination in public schools, and the state appealed that decision. That brings us to this week, when the ACLU of Arkansas announced its support for the plaintiffs in the case.
What the ACLU did is it filed a brief supporting the students and arguing essentially that the First Amendment has long protected the rights of students to receive information in the classroom, and asking the court to uphold the precedent that supports that right.
John Williams, the ACLU legal director, says the organization sees First Amendment issues at stake.
ACLU has long supported the right of students to receive information, to have free expression in the classroom.
Williams says major Supreme Court cases regarding student speech have involved the ACLU.
And the ACLU of Arkansas has been involved in student speech since its founding in 1969. So we felt it was important to speak up in this case, which involves the same rights that we've defended for 55 years in the past.
Emma, this is not the first time that the ACLU has challenged laws challenging what goes on in the classroom.
That's right. It's not the first time. It's also happened in Oklahoma, New Hampshire, and Florida, each of which has been blocked in whole or part by federal courts.
So this is just one of the stories that have come out of the LEARNS Act. What are some of the other stories, Emma, you know of that have come out also of this?
So there have been many stories that have come out of the LEARNS Act, or centered around the LEARNS Act, rather. Another one was about a lawsuit challenging the state's voucher program, known as the Educational Freedom Accounts. And that voucher program gives families the option to access public school funds to send their students to private schools. And that lawsuit still stands because a Pulaski County judge denied a motion to dismiss the case. That motion was made by defendants of the Arkansas Department of Education, the Arkansas State Board of Education, the Arkansas Department of Finance and Administration, and of course, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Now, the defendants cite that a main complaint of the lawsuit of school vouchers diverting money from its intended use is not true. They say the school voucher program is funded entirely by general revenue, which may be spent for any public purpose.
Well, back in April, Governor Sanders held her State of the State address. Did she mention anything about the LEARNS Act?
She, in fact, did. When she was first elected as governor, Governor Sanders said her top priority was to put education first in the state, but she wanted to push for higher teacher pay and universal school choice. And in her State of the Address a few months ago, she said that Arkansas is roaring ahead, and that starts with education. She explained that during the address that this year's budget was increased by 1.76%, which would be around $109 million, and that would be going to education and school vouchers.
You know, LEARNS Act is a 145 piece of legislation Governor Sanders signed back into law back in March of 2023. How effective has it been?
It's been very effective across the state, and even here in our station as we've been covering all these stories, trying to get everybody's sides heard, because there are people for it and, of course, against it.
Thank you, Emma.
Okay.
And welcome back to Crisis in the Classroom here in Little Rock, Arkansas. We're so honored to have April Reisma, president of the Arkansas Educational Association, Bill Kopsky, director of the Arkansas Public Policy Panel, Nicholas Horton, who's the founder and CEO of Opportunity Arkansas, and Emmy Henley, managing director of the Reform Alliance. Let me start with you, Ms. Reisma. What is indoctrination?
Whew. You know, we've been trying to find a definition for that for the last year and a half. And I often wonder exactly what that definition is. Many people here in the state of Arkansas have not been able to define it. I see it as something where you're trying to push your values off onto someone else.
So Bill, if you could summarize for us, what is the crisis in education in Arkansas that differs from the crisis in education anywhere across the United States? What is so unique about Little Rock?
Well, it's not just Little Rock. Arkansas as a whole ranks last in the country in child poverty, and poverty is the single biggest indicator of student success. So it's not surprising that our schools are underperforming across the whole state. And Arkansas can do better. We know how to do better. We haven't made the right investments to address the poverty and the other drivers of lower student performance.
Well, let me follow that up.
Yeah, please.
There are parents whose kids grow in poverty, and they thrive in the classroom. They master the classroom. Mm-hmm. What separates those kids that do well, not because of, but in spite of the poverty, from other kids?
You know, there's always exceptional individuals in any population, but we can't, as a society, rely on everybody being that exceptional individual. We know from science and from data and research that there are ways to boost student learning for every single child, no matter their background, and those are the things that we need to invest in to make our school system what our kids deserve.
You know, Nick, obviously, given your corporate background, I mean, you have to set up a business model that works, that delivers products, delivers success. What is it that could change, if you could recommend, after seeing this crisis for so long, that could make an immediate difference in the educational system?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that question. I appreciate you coming to Arkansas, and I really appreciate the way that you framed this discussion today, because we do have a crisis in the classroom. We have 2 out of 3 kids in Arkansas that can't read at grade level. We're sending kids through the education pipeline, and they're not ready for the workforce. They're not trained with skills that match today's 21st economy. And I think, we've got to start recognizing that, and we've done some of that through the LEARNS Act. We've made some really good progress there. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing that's been missing from the education system as a whole is accountability. Because if you live in a certain zip code in a certain area, state government says you have to go to this school, and there haven't been options for families to get outside of this little box that state government has put them in. There's no other place in the country, there's no other place in the world that operates like that. If people are watching right now on TV and they don't like what they're hearing, they can pick up their remote and change the channel, right? They can find something that fits their needs and their desires better. And that has been really missing from the education system for way too long.
Now, Emmy, I don't want to put words in Nick's mouth, but I think he says that if the system doesn't work for you, got to have choice, like choice in education. You got to place your kids in an education structure that actually works and benefits that child, because that child is that parent's future. And we know that education is that passport. What about other alternatives to, especially when you hear that 2 out of 3 are illiterate? Because that's what he's saying.
Absolutely. I mean, just like Bill said, there are some students that are exceptional. They're thriving in any environment. But you have to have those options that are there for the children that need different, special classes. They need smaller class sizes. They need more focus on their possible disabilities. I mean, we cannot expect everyone to learn the same exact way. Most kids don't want the same thing for dinner, much less, like taking in information in the same way.
When Emmy mentions that no kid learns the same, and this is not an indictment of the union, it's just a fact. They believe that one size fit all. But I think Emmy makes a very good point. Every child learns differently. You've got to find what makes that child enthusiastic about learning, whether it's how to solve math problems, how to read, how to be enthusiastic about learning history and English. How does one do that to make sure that every child has that same opportunity?
Well, let me correct you on one point you just said. The union does not believe that one size fits all. I'm a special education teacher here in the state of Arkansas, and I know that children learn differently. I'm fully prepared to make sure that my students all get the different things that they need. One thing that we don't have here in the state of Arkansas is a fully funded public education. And when we don't have fully funded public education, we can't provide everything that we need to. One thing about our Constitution states that we have a system that will provide opportunities for all children. And when we don't have the system that's fully funded and make sure that they have all the resources they need, they're not going to be able to provide everything that every child needs. Now, we do have educators in this state that bend over backwards, and they make sure that every single child that they come into contact gets everything that they can do themselves. But when your hands are tied with decreased resources like this, it's going to be challenging. We need to address the issues in a public situation first with our public funds.
Well, before I come back to you, Bill, what needs to change to unshackle the system so kids can learn? Where does the problem lie?
Fully funding our public schools, making sure that we have all of the resources that we need to be able to meet all of the diverse needs of every single 100% of our children in Arkansas and everywhere, quite frankly, deserve a quality public education.
It's interesting, Bill, because when de Tocqueville came here hundreds of years ago, and he was looking for what separated America from the rest of the world, just newly acquired our independence, and yet we were 50 years ahead of most nations around the world. And he went into the churches where it was aflame with the gospel. But he also went to the education systems, the schools, and he found that they were far more advanced. They teach the moral education, they taught discipline, and the kids learned, and they were more efficient in their learning hundreds of years ago with all the advancements of where we are today. Why is that?
I'm not sure I'd agree with your...
That's okay if you don't agree with it.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that we're not as advanced as we were then. I think we're... It is a fact that kids are not learning and are not as educated today as they were 40 or 50 years ago. Again, I think I would argue with you on that
yes.
point. One thing that's unique about the American school system is we have a school system for all children, where in a lot of parts of the country, or a lot of parts of the world, they only allow public education for certain segments of the student population. So we take everybody who shows up at the door. And one thing that I know all of us here agree on is every single child has the right to a high-quality education. The question is, how do you provide that? And the evidence says that you provide that by providing things that there's research to back. So pre-K, universal access to after-school and summer programs, addressing child poverty, making sure kids aren't hungry or sick when they come to school, and then solving our special education system by investing much more in special education. Arkansas's own state commission found that we're underfunding just the catastrophic needs of special education students by over $100 million, yet our lawmakers haven't addressed that at all. So it's easy to say that we don't have parental choice, but in fact, Arkansas has had parental choice for over a decade. It's universal. No one in Arkansas is stuck in their school because of zip code. It's not a fact.
Not anymore.
Well, before LEARNS, no one was stuck. You're spreading false information. No, Arkansas has had right. Expansive school choice for quite some time. The difference is that it was a choice between public schools that met high standards. Arkansas has now created 3 different school systems. We have a private school system funded by public dollars that have very low standards. We have a charter school system also funded by public dollars that have lower standards but higher than the private schools have to meet. And then the highest quality standards are for public schools. So instead of having one efficient school system, Arkansas now has 3 inefficient school systems, and we're not investing in where the research shows we can make the biggest bang for our buck, which is pre-K, after school and summer, improving teacher quality, programs like that.
You know, I think people watching this broadcast, and they would come to a conclusion that the problems with the educational system is not just money. There are other things that are going on here that people are unwilling to confront. And what are they?
Well, I totally agree. And I think, again, a lot of it goes back to reading. If you can't read, you can't learn, period. And, you know, there's a saying in the education world, you know, through 3rd grade, you're learning to read. And after 3rd grade, you're reading to learn. But if you can't read, once you get through 3rd grade, get to 4th grade, 5th grade, how are you going to learn science? How are you going to learn math? How are you going to learn these more complex topics? It requires reading, and we have failed our kids. 2 out of 3 cannot read at grade level. It's amusing and really sad to hear folks, our friends on the other side, talk about, well, we just haven't fully funded education, and we just haven't done enough in the public education system. We've been doing that for 100 years. And we've been getting the same failed results. And by the way, it's simply not true that we haven't fully funded education, public education in the state of Arkansas. Public education spending went up $200 million last year. It's going up every year, just like it always has, but we're getting the same failed results. So I really think it comes back to accountability and competition, putting parents in charge, letting them decide what's best for their kids. That's how we're going to get better results.
More Crisis in the Classroom coming up after the break. And we'll take a look at a lawsuit between students and their school district over newly constructed schools and why the students say they're not up to standards. Welcome back to Crisis in the Classroom. There's a lawsuit in progress between students at Jacksonville North Pulaski and the school district. The school district opened new buildings for the school year, and the Jacksonville North Pulaski district agreed to make their newly constructed schools equal that of the standards of the existing school. But the students and their representatives say those buildings aren't up to par. Let's take a look.
They are required to provide schools that are equal, safe, attractive.
Austin Porter, one of the attorneys representing the McClendon interveners, said he and others walked through Biomeda, Merle Taylor, and Bobby Lester elementary schools to compare, with Lester being held as the standard.
The Jacksonville North Pulaski agreed that the 2 new schools, Merle Taylor and Biomeda, would be equal to that of Bobby Lester, which is not the case.
Detailing just a few of the stark differences in the buildings.
The flooring in the Merle Taylor School, the Biomeda School, is just plain concrete slab flooring. If you go into the classrooms at Bobby Lester, they have these beautiful decorative tiles on the floors. The walls are painted beautifully. The chairs match the flooring as far as in the various schools. Classrooms at Bobby Lester, that's not the case at Merle Taylor nor at Biomeda.
Porter said issues like this date back to Brown versus the Board of Education.
Schools, especially in the South, and black schools in black areas, were inferior type schools. Children had to attend poorly constructed schools, and that affects education.
Submitting written arguments and photos to back up their claims.
We hope that the judge will look at what we presented and agree with us that the schools, Merle Taylor and Biometro, are not equal to that of Bobby Lester, and that they have to do something in order to remedy that situation.
Who can speak to that, what they just heard?
I can agree with the fact that we have a history of making sure that our black and brown students are not receiving the same quality that others are. We're in a current situation where that exasperation continues.
Are you saying it's because of racism continues to thrive here?
Oh, yes. Yes, I do. I see that all the time.
Some of it's a structural inequity, too. I mean, like, so the LEARNS Act made Arkansas school systems actually less equal by several mechanisms. So, like, they provided some pilot programs of innovative stuff that we support, like, maternal health care for teachers or some reading programs, but they are only pilot and only for schools that can provide matching money. Well, guess what schools can provide matching money? The wealthier districts. So lower income districts can't compete, so now they have a harder time attracting equal teachers, and they have a harder time providing these extra services that schools in high wealth areas can provide. It's just an area where I don't think it was intentional by the governor, but when we provide these competitive programs, we really disadvantage low-income districts that can't afford to compete at the table.
You know, I would find it hard to believe that in 2024, given that our greatest resource is human capital, and the impact of a child not being educational, and how it can lead to sexual trafficking, how it can lead to crime, how it can lead to death and incarceration, that anybody would have in place a system that is racist, bigoted, unequal, and unfair. Now, call me isolated, call me living in an ivory tower. What is missing from this argument?
Well, I think one of the great things about the LEARNS Act and the way that it empowers parents is we're not going to have this two-tiered system of education anymore, where based on your income or your zip code, you have to go to the school that you're zoned for, regardless of income, regardless of means. Now every Arkansas child can take advantage of the Education Freedom Program and go to the school of their choice. Previously, and I've heard, Condoleezza Rice, who I really admire, has said this before, we've had, to Bill's point, he said earlier, we've had parental choice for a long time. The problem is it was only for the rich kids. And now we have a level playing field where folks of any income and any background can go to the school of their choice, whether that's a public school or a home school or a private school, whatever works best for them and their specific learning needs.
You're laughing, why?
Because he's factually incorrect again.
Wait. He's not saying you're factually incorrect.
Well,
that may be his perspective from his experience. And that's what he believes. But I'm not going to say he's factually incorrect.
But
you just disagree with him.
But I can show you the law that says parents have a choice, and he's saying that they didn't before. There's a difference of opinions, and there's a difference that you're entitled to your own opinion. You're not entitled to your own fact, right?
There was a limited capped choice program before.
It's my turn. On this notion that before only wealthy parents had school choice, it's just not true. Every child in Arkansas before the LEARNS Act, they could choose. April, you did it.
I actually did it with my own child. Yeah.
I mean,
to bring him where I was
it's just not accurate.
So are you factually incorrect, Emmy? You're the neutral arbiter here. Let me hear your perspective.
I would love to. So there was school choice, but it was only public school choice. So you were able to change districts, change schools within your district. But again, I believe that the school choice maybe that you're referring to was only for wealthy parents. You could choose a private school, or you could choose to move your entire family to access different options if you had the funds to do so. Now, along with the LEARNS Act and the philanthropic scholarship, these families that were not previously able to just uproot their entire lives can now afford to, access different options. Like Nick said, private school, micro school, homeschooling. I mean, if the public school isn't working for them, and it might work for some, then why shouldn't they have that option?
Let's address that.
Wait. We're always respectful.
Yes, for sure.
Absolutely. April, address that.
I just want to say that when we talk about all students being able to take advantage of it, that's not accurate, because most of our state are in rural areas where there are no choices except for the public school. And when you have issues like students having those no choices there, they're not going to have any choice once that public school actually closes because of loss of attendance or loss of funds, as the public funds go to take care of these private school vouchers, they're not going to have the funding to be able to stay open. That is our biggest fear. There's actually only 25 counties that have the access.
It's a total myth.
We have 75 counties here in the state of Arkansas.
Many times. There's a private school, EFA participating school within driving distance of 90%. We've done a study on this, 90% of Arkansas school-age kids. But it's not just about schools. To Emmy's point, it's about homeschooling. It's about micro schools. There's a lot of options for kids in rural parts of Arkansas, and there will be more. We're only 18 months into this program. As we get further into the program, there are going to be more and more options for kids, and for some reason, that worries our friends on the other side.
Let me
provide a few facts.
Before you do.
Yeah, please.
May I interject?
Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
You know, when I was growing up in the rural South, my parents demanded that we read books.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
They demanded that we go to the library. Not only that, when we were in the classroom, it was not enough for our parents to read to us. We had to read to our parents. In fact, the intellectual gap in education takes place before the kid ever reaches kindergarten.
You just made the case for pre-K.
And so, and what I'm not hearing here today, where are the parents? If parents are involved in that child's education early on, it makes a difference.
Totally makes a difference.
Can I share a story with you? There's a community group we work with down in Prescott, Arkansas. And they were frustrated at low reading scores for their students. So they started a Dolly Parton Imagination Library. Because one fact that they knew is that low-income children have far less access to books than even just middle-income students. It's a remarkable difference. It's like one book per household for a low-income student versus like 300 books in an average middle-class house. Just a staggering difference in access. So they started this Dolly Parton Imagination Library. They're getting books to kids. They're helping them read. They're helping teach the parents to read to them. The school's involved, and their scores are going up. So it's not that there's not a parent in Arkansas that is sitting home glad that their child is not learning to read. But there are parents in Arkansas who have jobs, who have life circumstances, who have other things that makes it hard for them. But what we know from the evidence and the research is that things like pre-K and providing access to books and providing a little bit of parental support around reading make a huge difference.
I don't think you would have a problem with pre-K.
No,
not at all.
I would support all of that.
Yes.
We want children to learn. But the parents that I talk to every day have made sacrifices for their children that aren't learning now. And I don't have any problem with traditional public schools. If they need more funding, if there's a reason to increase the funding, then great. Okay, but there are, regardless of how it's funded, there are going to be students that cannot learn in that environment. They need something different. They need whatever it is. And those parents know their child the best. So I don't know why we would take that choice away from them.
We're coming back. We have time. Even after the LEARNS Act was passed and implemented, there have been some questions and uncertainties. Questions about the volunteer requirements, teacher pay, and public monies going to where? Private schools. Now, when we come back, you hear from the Secretary of Education as she addresses these questions, and guess what you're watching? Yes, Crisis in the Classroom, and keep it right here. We'll be back.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence, there's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
let's stop the politicking, let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. Welcome back to Crisis in the Classroom. I'm Armstrong Williams, and today we're seriously examining not only the crisis in education, but right here in Arkansas, the LEARNS Act. The law has left so many people in Arkansas divided with questions on parts of the law's requirements. The Secretary of Education, Jacob Olivia, attended to answer questions and discuss the ongoing implementation of the LEARNS Act. The panel discussed volunteer hour requirements, teacher pay, and the criticism that taxpayer dollars are being taken from public schools.
The LEARNS Act nearing the completion of its first year implemented in Arkansas schools. In the law, it states 75 community service hours are required for high school students to graduate. Some parents saying this puts a burden on working parents and students who have extracurriculars.
We know there's some real special circumstances for some of our students that may struggle to meet the needs of these requirements. Well, we're not going to let that hold a student back from graduating from high school. We're going to work with that school. We're going to work with these families to make sure they can get this across the finish line.
Arkansas Secretary of Education Jacob Oliva says they plan to work with schools for volunteer hours to be completed during the school day. Jacksonville North Pulaski School District Superintendent Jeremy Owa says they have already set that in motion.
We also provide opportunities right there in the vicinity of the high school that will allow our young people to be readily accessible for those community service opportunities.
Another stipulation of LEARNS is increasing teachers' starting pay to $50,000. OS says making his pay scale for teachers was a challenge, and he says smaller districts expressed to him that it produced a bigger challenge for them. But OS says it has also been beneficial.
Last year, we started the school year with double-digit vacancies. This year, there were single digits. And going into next year, one of my largest elementary schools, about 800 students, only has one vacancy.
A criticism of the LEARNS Act has been that school choice is taking away public education funds. But Oliva says scholarship programs similar to the LEARNS school vouchers have been around for years and assures this will not take funds away.
If a school district does lose students over time, they get declining enrollment, additional dollars to help sustain some of the loss of those students. So it's really not diverting from one place or another. It's really about empowering parents and making sure that if they do want to choose other options, those options are obtainable.
What we're discussing here is very sad and so disheartening. Is there any school in this state of Arkansas that you can point to that once had dismal results, but yet they turned it around and the students are excelling in science, math, English, and reading?
My school. I'd like to shout out Robinson Middle School.
Tell us the history of Robinson.
Well, I can't tell you too much because I haven't been there that long,
Okay.
but when I got there, we had a new principal and we had some pretty low scores. But she motivated the staff and they were able to come back to help the students.
You got to
and
tell
the
us more
scores went
specifically,
really
what did she
high.
do to make that? Because that's a huge change.
That is a huge thing. We got to make sure that we remember our why. Why are we here? We're here for the students, right? And we have to remember that. And it's a constant thing to do to remember that what we're here for. But we also have to get along as a staff and realize that we're all here as a team working together to make sure that education gets better.
What about the school in North Arkansas that April was just mentioning during the break? They all just left. And yet, because the place it shook everything up, the school system is doing better. What do we have to do, Emmy, to get more qualified teachers and teachers motivated? Because, the classroom is sometimes like a war zone. There are a lot of issues that these teachers deal with. The kids bring a lot of problems to the classroom, and the teachers don't, and the parents don't necessarily support the teachers.
So I think that it all does come back to the parent involvement. I mean, you want the parents involved in the school. You want them to be able to decide where their child is going to school, because you're right, there has been violence in the classroom. But maybe that child isn't thriving. Maybe there's some frustration. They're obviously dealing with something that needs to be, addressed.
But at what point do you remove that kid from the school?
I think I don't know. I'm not a classroom teacher.
But if, as a parent, or as anyone, if the person is disruptive and the disruption continues, does it get to a point to remove the kid from the school?
I would think it does, yes. I mean, and that's why there should be other options. There are schools specifically for, students that could benefit from that. There's a first responder military school that's opening up. There are certain schools that focus on students with severe special needs. So maybe that's somewhere that they could go that would benefit them more than a general classroom where they're disrupting the other students that are thriving there.
If choice is just one of the options, and there's a pushback on that, what are other options that could get these kids to learning?
Well, I think in the LEARNS Act, you're saying, we went from near the bottom in starting teacher pay to now #1 in the country when you adjust for cost of living. We also created some new incentives for teachers to come into some of these underserved areas. We're going to help them pay back some of their student debt. We're looking at merit. We've done some beginning work on merit pay for really good teachers and providing bonuses for some of those. And then, look, the LEARNS Act also included funding for literacy coaches, tutoring grants. There are a vast number of resources, and I appreciate you kind of bringing us back full circle on that, because it's not just about school choice. That is a huge component of this, but there are a lot of other incentives in the LEARNS Act that I think are going to help. And look, accountability, I'm going to just keep saying that, because I think that really is what so much of this comes back to. If you're in a school, public school, private school, homeschool, it doesn't matter, and you're not seeing the results that you want for your kid, you have options now. And public schools and charter schools and all the schools across the state of Arkansas now are going to have to be responsive to that. They're going to have to, we talked earlier about what happens in the business world. And if in the business world or any other sector of our lives, those results aren't happening, imagine if you had another place in the world where 2 out of 3 of your customers were dissatisfied. We have 2 out of 3 kids in Arkansas that can't read, but we haven't had other options for those parents to go to. And so I think over time, and we're already starting to see the positive results for this, that's going to help all schools in Arkansas get better.
But vouchers are going to actually cause those scores to go down. We know that from the evidence. You can look at studies in Arizona, Ohio, Florida, Louisiana. Every single academic study of a statewide voucher program shows that they lead to learning loss.
Why?
Not only learning loss, but
tell us why.
Because they end up in sub-quality private schools. So if you imagine Little Rock.
But what you're implying here is that they could work, but they just don't always work.
Right, and that's one of the reasons why we've proposed having equal standards for any school that receives public financing. We haven't said no to vouchers. We've said if you take a voucher, you have to meet the same standards as a public school so we can ensure high quality for everybody. That's what we've said. We've not said no vouchers. We've said if you take a voucher, you have to meet the same standards as a public school so we can ensure that all the schools are playing on the same level playing field, and parents and students can know that they're getting the quality that they're signing up for, and the public can know that there's accountability for how their dollars are being spent.
Do you have any issue with what he's saying? Because I feel you breathing down my back.
Yeah.
So tell me what the issue is.
They have said no vouchers. They've said no vouchers over and over and over
again.
But
that's not what he's
saying.
But
they've lost that debate. So now they're trying to do this equal standards thing, which is completely unconstitutional. It was rejected overwhelmingly by the voters of Arkansas this summer, who had a chance to put it on the ballot this fall, and they said no, we don't want that. But it's just this idea that private schools somehow have lower standards than public schools is just mind-boggling to me, because I know families. I mean, look, this is personal to me. Like, I was fortunate to go to a private school for a few years in high school. My dad worked 2.5 jobs to pay for us to be able to go to a private school. He wasn't doing that because it was some sort of, shoddy operation. He was doing it because he wanted us to get a good education. There's families in Arkansas that pay $15,000, $20,000 a year to send their kids to private school out of their own pocket. They're not doing that because these are horrible operations. They're doing it because those private schools are providing a quality education that they want for their kids.
Again, if you look at the facts of the data, in Louisiana, the statewide voucher program there had a bigger negative impact on student learning than Hurricane Katrina. In Ohio, their statewide voucher program, I can show you the study, had a bigger
Louisiana
negative impact,
just passed a universal
negative
freedom
impact in
program.
Ohio than the COVID-19 pandemic. These programs just do not work. But the biggest frustration is that for decades, we've known how to improve our schools. We know what to do. It is pre-K, it is teacher quality, it is after school and summer. There's overwhelming academic consensus that these things help all children, but we don't invest in them because they cost money and politicians don't like them. And we have a bunch of billionaires pushing this voucher myth that's going to solve all of our problems.
You think it's a myth?
I think it's a total myth. Because, again, every single study of a statewide voucher program shows that they lead to catastrophic learning loss. They don't work.
Emmy, let me ask Emmy, where are you? You're my neutral arbiter on this.
So that's not true. I mean, there are studies that have shown improvements. I think that there are studies that show the first year sometimes has a decline in the testing scores, but I think if there's change in the students' lives, that could account for that. Now, the private schools, if you think that they're not up to the state standards that already aren't meeting our kids' needs with their reading, then that's a whole other, why would we want to do that? And they're accountable to the parents. These schools are opt-in. They're not forced to go to their zone school that might not be meeting their needs. So the parents can simply move them back to the school if they would like, if it's not meeting their needs now.
Private schools
Let me get April. April, where are you in this discussion?
Let me tell you.
Okay.
One of the biggest issues I have is not having certified teachers in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And when a school is okay with just having a person who is breathing as leading the classroom, I have a major problem with that. And we need to have a good quality educator preparation program to put quality teachers and to keep those quality teachers in the classroom. Right now, we are having veteran teachers such as myself contemplating leaving and also leaving because we've had a huge exodus, leaving because there is nothing except for teacher retirement keeping them in the classroom. And of course, love for their students here in the state of Arkansas.
What is wrong with the teachers being certified? You know, we've had experiences where you have a teacher teaching math and they have no experience, no background, no degree in any kind of math. You have somebody teach Spanish and they don't necessarily speak the language. Yeah. But I think there's an argument here for them being certified, but challenge me.
Well, there's no problem with having certified teachers.
Good.
There's certainly no issue with that.
Since you agree,
so let's
I'm going to give the listening audience a break to say we finally agreed on something. I'm going to take a break because we found an area of agreement. You know, a troubling issue facing most schools in the country is the lack of teachers. And it's been an ongoing problem for some time. That's what we've just started discussing. But coming up, we'll discuss the teacher shortage across the nation and how districts are recruiting teachers to tackle the crisis in the classroom. Keep it right here.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
We so appreciate your staying with Crisis in the Classroom. America and Arkansas are in the midst of a teacher shortage. But there is a new partnership that may change that. More than 3/4 of states in the country were facing a teacher shortage in 2023, just a year ago. But the University of Central Arkansas Deans for the College of Education says they are working to bring more teachers to Arkansas with a scholarship initiative.
Teacher shortages are happening everywhere, even right here at home.
We do have a teacher shortage in Arkansas, and let me say that we have a teacher shortage in certain geographic areas and in certain content areas.
Dr. Victoria Grove Scott, the Dean for the College of Education at the University of Central Arkansas, said those shortages can be felt in teaching areas like special education. But there is hope when it comes to bringing more teachers into the state. It's an initiative through the LEARNS Act.
The Arkansas Department of Higher Education has a new scholarship that was just released, and it's called the Arkansas Teacher Academy Scholarship, and it is $5,000 a semester, or up to $5,000 a semester, to cover tuition and fees for students who are going into teacher preparation.
So you might be wondering, how does this help to combat teacher shortages in Arkansas?
For every year that they receive the funding, they have to teach in Arkansas. So we will see a lot of people who may have been kind of lured outside of Arkansas to teach in another state, staying with us so we won't be losing our talent.
College education comes with a price, quite literally. But Dr. Grove Scott said this new scholarship will be able to help with the cost.
We sent out an email to 286 undergraduate students yesterday, and probably closer to 300 graduate students, kind of announcing this and saying, here's where you go. And I will tell you that within 5 minutes, I had a student respond to me. Her response to me was, you do not realize how much of a difference this will make for me. I was worried about would I be able to finish my degree.
You know, when I was coming in today, Emmy, I saw the Gold Star Families Highway, which sort of touched me. But you know what? Being a teacher today is like being in a war zone. You deserve the highest stars and the highest honor for being a teacher, because it has the greatest impact on a child and that child's outcome. What is it that we can get teachers back to the classroom, the teacher with the enthusiasm and the joy for learning, knowing the impact that it will have on these kids 20 or 30 years from now?
Absolutely. I mean, I cannot imagine how difficult that job is. I think that with the LEARNS Act, we have started bringing in things that will attract people to teach in Arkansas. There's the higher pay raise, there's the 12 weeks of maternity leave, the merit-based pay, which is based on their students' growth. So we're already starting that process to bring them in. And then this scholarship that they're offering now is going to be just another thing on top of that that allows us to get more quality teachers.
You know, April, something we touched on earlier in the show is what these teachers have to deal with in the classroom, the behavior of these kids. Talk about the behavior issue.
Well, the behavior has gotten worse since COVID. And quite frankly, it is almost like a war zone in classrooms. I've experienced myself. One thing that I know for sure as an educator here in the state of Arkansas, I know what we need. I'm in there. The people that are on the front line are the ones that need to be brought into the discussion. And that's one thing that doesn't get done. We don't get asked what we need to be able to be better prepared to take care of all students in the state of Arkansas. And I just really, I implore for the future that our legislators make sure that the educators of this state have some sort of say in the changes that they make. Because when you asked about teachers, you went to Emmy, but Emmy said she's not a teacher. She doesn't know. But teachers and staff, all educators in a classroom and in a school, they know because they're on the front lines.
You know, Nick, not only are the educators, the teachers, but the parents must be involved also. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And I think teachers obviously have an important say. Superintendents, principals, this is a group effort, right? To solve these problems, collaborative effort. But I do think, to your point, the parent voice is the voice that's been missing for way too long. And so I think that for me as a parent of school-age kids now, that's really exciting because I grew up in a very low-income family, and my dad worked 2.5 jobs so that mom could stay home and homeschool us and then put us through a few years of private school. And having that parental voice, it's just so important. I do want to say, though, and not to ruin kind of the kumbaya we have going here, but it is, it's stunning to me to hear folks on that side of the stage talk about these silver bullets that they have in pre-K and all these great ideas. I just want folks out there listening to realize these are the folks that have been in charge of the education system for the last 80 years.
Yeah, I wish.
They want us to go back to the same way that we've been doing things that has failed every step of the way. 2/3 of kids can't read. They're not ready for the workforce. We have record levels of poverty and dependency. It all goes back to a broken education system. We have to start doing things differently.
But given the fact that this state is in crisis, what does the future look like for the kids and the parents 10 years from now? What can they expect? Not this same conversation, I hope.
I hope it's not. No. I mean, I think that, again, we know the path out of here. To say that we've been in charge, God, I wish.
Let's forget about what he said.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's talk about the path forward. What can parents look forward to for the next 10 years?
Well, again, what we need to push on our lawmakers to do is invest in where the evidence says we can have the biggest impact. And they're not silver bullets. Actually, there is not a single silver bullet. Education is an ecosystem. You have to address the whole child. But community schools are a way of addressing a lot of the challenges that we're talking about. Pre-K, after school and summer, these aren't silver bullets. They are research-proven strategies that combined together improve education. That's what we have to push on our lawmakers to do so that we can't afford to wait 10 years for the current system.
Hold that,
okay.
Because I have a minute left and I'm going to reserve it for April.
Good.
I always like to wrap these shows on hope and progress. Tell us what works well in Arkansas.
Oh, what works well. You know, our educators in every school in this state are trying, bending over backwards to make sure that our students have everything that they need. That's what's working well here in the state of Arkansas. We still have educators that care about children because they know that our children are our future. And as long as we have teachers and educators in every single building that care about students, we can keep moving forward. But Bill's right. We need those proven things.
And in 30 seconds, what is it that parents continue to do well? 30 seconds.
Parents, I think, especially coming out of the pandemic, have a renewed interest in making sure their kids are getting a quality education. And thankfully, because of the LEARNS Act and the progress that we've made, they have more choices than ever. And we're only starting to see, we've already moved up the education rankings in just the last 18 months.
All I can say is this. You don't have to look further than this panel to see the difference that a quality education can make throughout your life for a lifetime. It's just right here. I want to thank April. I want to thank Bill, Nicholas, and Emmy for joining us for a very provocative, thought-provoking conversation. You know, as we've seen here in Little Rock, Arkansas, the crises facing our schools are not confined to the walls of the school. They echo across the country, threaten the future of our children, and in turn, our beloved nation. Education isn't just about preparing students for jobs. It's about shaping responsible, engaged citizens who will lead with vision and compassion. When we fail to provide that, the price is paid in broken lives, lost potential, and communities left to suffer the consequences. It's time for us all to step up because the future we want for our children depends on the action we take today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Crisis in the Classroom. I'm Armstrong Williams.